This is Optometrists Building Empires, and I'm your host, Ankit Patel. Each week, we'll explore the journey of multi-practice ownership and leadership in optometry. Join us for insights and strategies from the top minds in our field. This show is sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team helps your office increase revenues, reduce costs, and reduce staffing headaches. Let's build your empire together. Today's guest is a real unique entrepreneur. He's a seasoned executive and optometry-focused entrepreneur with over 2 decades of experience in healthcare and optical retail operations. He served as Senior Vice President of Retail Operations for LensCrafters at Luxottica Retail North America, where he has led strategic initiatives to enhance patient care and business performance. He has since built a thriving, patient-centric business grounded in operational excellence and a commitment to delivering outstanding patient and customer experiences. He's the founder of the largest Pearle Vision franchise in the United States. Bill oversees 92 locations across 14 states as of today, and I'm sure that's going to continue to grow. He's the CEO and founder of West Point Optical Group. Please welcome Bill Noble. Bill, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about this call. You have a unique perspective that I think a lot of folks will really appreciate. And with that, I think you have a unique take on my first question is, what was the most important thing that helped you grow your quote unquote empire?
I think it boils down to relationships, and I'll use that term, not only relationships from professional relationships, but we're talking about relationships with investors, relationships with lenders, relationships obviously with our franchisor. Having come from within the Luxottica network, I was very familiar with a lot of the decision makers. So I think at the fundamental foundation of everything that we've done has been relationships. I had to go raise money, from some of my West Point classmates to start the process when we bought our first 10 stores. And so I leaned into those personal relationships forged at the academy and raised $2.1 million. We bought our first 10 stores and we were approved because I knew the decision makers on the other side of the table were all people that I had worked with previously in my role at LensCrafters. So that's what got us started. And then as we have grown the business over the past 11 years, again, I keep coming back to that familiar touch point of relationships with lenders, first with Fifth Third Bank, now with Bank of Montreal from that standpoint. So having, a strong relationship with our lender has been absolute key as we've grown with pretty much using debt financing and growing our store count from 10 to our current level of 92. We also have investors. We have a private equity fund, Lowwater, that owns 35% of our business. And so we tapped into the PE world and built relationships, within that community that has allowed us to continue to grow and build a platform, make investments in the technology that allows us to have a scalable platform. So the short, succinct answer to your questions, it's all about relationships across a broad spectrum, of disciplines, if you will. I think that's what allows us to be successful.
Yeah, I was reading a book called The New Business Road Test. And one of the key elements to success is having relationships up and down the supply chain so that when stuff happens, you can smooth out issues. So you were on both sides of the equation. So you knew the operational side, and then the financing side, you had relationships there. So anytime you hit a road bump, because I think a lot of times people might hit a road bump, like you could probably tell us a couple examples of road bumps that you hit, but because of that relationship, you're able to smooth it over.
Well, it's certainly not if, but when, because any entrepreneur will tell you that road bumps are par for the course. And so we've hit several road bumps over the course of, our 11 years in business. And probably the best example would be COVID. When COVID hit, you talk about, getting hit in the face with a 2x4 because the world essentially stopped. And not all of the COVID relief legislation had been passed. And so we were scrambling from that standpoint. So we were able to lean into our franchisor because we had relationships. We were able to lean into our lenders. We were able to lean into our landlords and leveraging those relationships because everyone was, scratching their head and trying to figure it out. And because we had strong relationships to start, we were given, I think, some leeway and leniency that others may not have been afforded from that standpoint. So COVID is always, the first example of, of that road bump, that kind of disruptive, pandemic that literally changed the way we did business. And again, through the grace of God and the legislatures, we were deemed an essential business. So we were only closed one day, literally one day during all of COVID. And so we were able to have revenue continuing to come in, albeit at obviously a reduced level from that standpoint. But every dollar that came in was absolutely essential in allowing us to survive, the COVID pandemic. So that's probably the best example of a huge roadblock that we laid into those relationships to help us, to navigate our way over, around, under, whatever we had to do to keep the doors open and keep our employees employed.
So, it's interesting because you come at the industry from a slightly different perspective. You're industry expert, industry insider or expert, right? And shifted to the entrepreneur side, the other side of it, the entrepreneurial side with your locations. And help me understand a little bit about why you decided to do at this level, right? You could have done a franchise at one or two locations, the good lifestyle. What made you tick? Why go to this level to 92 stores versus just maybe one, maybe two?
What's the old adage, go big or go home?
Yeah.
No, I would love to tell you that when my wife and I sat down and decided what we were going to do, that we had this vision for a 100-story empire. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, when we were pitching this to my classmates for investment, we were talking about getting to 25 stores. We could get to 25 stores the way the modeling we had done, man. It was going to be a great business. I had just stepped out of corporate America. And so I was looking to be able to control my own destiny. And at 25 stores, the income that we would generate and allow my family to continue the lifestyle that we were accustomed to. And that's all we were really thinking about. But as we got into it and we started to truly understand, the breadth of the opportunity in front of us, I think it started gaining momentum very quickly, that we were able to start to build a platform that was uniquely scalable within the Pearl network. I mean, there were not a whole lot of other large aggregators, and there still to this day aren't a lot of large aggregators within the Pearl network. There's us at 92, and then there's a group out of Las Vegas that has, I think, 12 locations now, and a group out of New Jersey that has 12 locations as well. And then from there, it's a lot of single, operators. And so the pathway, if you will, to consolidate with licensed operators that were looking to exit, because we're within a franchise, we weren't necessarily as appealing to a lot of the large aggregators because you had a large corporate entity from a franchise standpoint that you had to deal with. And a lot of the aggregators, don't want to deal with that headache necessarily. So
Yeah.
they were out within the independent space, gobbling up locations and increasing their store count. So we were essentially the only game in town. And so through, our relationships with our lenders, with the PE firm that we partner with, we saw a unique opportunity to start growing and expanding. And as we grew and expanded, we learned some hard lessons. But the good news is we were able to keep the car going down the highway, if you will. We got a couple flat tires along the way, but nothing that we couldn't necessarily address. And here we are 11 years later, sitting at 92 locations. So I think, again, the short answer to your question was it didn't start out that way. But the minute we got into this, we started to truly wrap our arms around, the size and scale of the opportunity. And with my board of managers, who are a lot of my day one investors, we started just growing and aggregating. And again, a lot of licensed operators were looking for an exit.
They weren't able to get it from traditional PE or traditional doctors buying.
And a lot of, as you guys, you probably know as well as I, or perhaps better, the new graduate coming out of optometry school isn't looking to own a practice. I shouldn't say some of them are, but the majority of them are more interested in a work-life balance. They want to work 4 days a week, no weekends, and build their lifestyle kind of around their family versus their lifestyle around their job. And obviously being an owner and operator or as an optometrist or an optician, that becomes your whole life and everything else becomes secondary. And I think that created an opportunity for us that, again, there weren't a lot of competition for us as we started, aggregating store count.
So if I'm reflecting back on your journey, and it's like most entrepreneurial journeys, it's like, here, it's like, here, hold my beer, watch this, right? It's like, let me try this. And so what I'm hearing is, and tell me if anything's wrong here, you had this job on the Luxottica side, and you're like, you know what? I think we can work something. I think I can do something on my own. And what do I need to do to get this done? Man, 25 locations in Pearl. I know the business. I know how to operate them. I think we get to 25, that I'd be happy there. So let me get some money, because one or two I might be able to do, but 25 I can't get to there without some extra help and relationships and funding and other help. Let me put that small group together. Let's start doing this. And all of a sudden, grows and grows, and like, wait, this is a little bit, there's a unique opportunity here. We're finding that these other folks who own pearls, who want to sell and exit right now, don't have any buyers because of the way they're structured with Luxottica, and the deal is just not as attractive, and the new grads aren't necessarily wanting to go into this. So it's really a buyer's market in specifically the pearl vision space. And so you're like, well, why don't we just see where this takes us and go from there? And now we already have these relationships that are built up with financing and lending. So it's easier to be able to do those acquisitions because you have already that built in. Is that kind of how it came into this? Is that accurate, or miss anything?
Ve- Very accurate. Just two points of clarification. One, easy is not a word that I would use to describe kind of
Clearly.
how we did this from that standpoint. It's a lot of hard work, but
Yeah.
your premise is absolutely, is 100% accurate from that standpoint. And then at the start, again, you know, West Point, McKinsey, West Point, Harvard Business School, McKinsey, I was on a path to be, C-suite, corner office in corporate America. That's what I thought were my future, despite the fact that my parents are both entrepreneurs. They grew up in South Georgia, little town called Albany. So I had
All the
seen that entrepreneurial path and never necessarily thought it was for me. I had all the right schools, resume was impeccable. That's the path that I was on. And as life works out and God's plan were very, very different from what I envisioned for what he had in store for me from that standpoint. And it all necessarily worked out for the best from that standpoint. And so again, I think the start was not necessarily lifelong ambition to be an entrepreneur. It was something that hit me literally at 49 years old when we started this thing. That's when it hit me. And so, I always, my wife and I joke that we've been playing catch up, right? We had started this at 30, where would we be from that standpoint? So it all worked out. And again, I'm so appreciative of, the classmates that helped me start this
yeah.
or, opportunity. Without them, we aren't sitting here today, our lenders and obviously our franchisor as well, because Luxottica, had a lot of say in allowing us to grow. They could have very easily capped us early on in our, in our growth trajectory, but, through the leadership that was at Pearl Vision at the time, Alex Wilkes, and Kathleen Steele, it allowed us, through a partnership with them, to continue to grow. So a lot of people very much had their hands in the success of West Point Optical Group. And at the top of that list is my wife, who supported me when, hey, let's leave this cushy, shouldn't say cushy, but let's leave this corporate job, start from scratch, roll the dice, if you will, to investors again, and our employees. And we've got a lot of our employees that have been with us day one when we started, in a little conference room in Columbus, Ohio. I looked at 10 store managers that the day before they were employed by a multi-billion-dollar corporation, multinational billion-dollar corporation. And here's this guy coming in saying, hey, I'm Bill Noble and this is West Point Optical Group. And, your futures are safe with us from that standpoint. And so they believed in us, and all those employees are still with the company today. So I think that speaks volumes about, those store managers, speaks volumes about our business and how far we've come over the past 11 years.
Nice. That's great. Story. And I'm curious, as you were talking, I wonder if you would have had the relationships and been able to build this at 30. It's almost, I don't know if you would have had it in the infrastructure in place to be able to get to this point if you were at 30 versus me at
No,
49.
I probably wouldn't have. I think at 30, I was just finishing up. I was a captain in the Army, I
Okay.
think. Yeah. I think if the math works out and get ready to go to HBS. So
Gotcha.
probably not. I probably would not have had the relationships or the foresight. I obviously wouldn't have known about optical,
Yeah.
right? So from that standpoint, what I had seen from an entrepreneurial standpoint was my mom owned, daycare centers,
Oh, yeah.
and my dad had a flower shop and jazz nightclub. So I mean,
That's cool.
neither one of those were something that had a tremendous amount of appeal to me, but the common denominator for both my mom and my dad was hard work. I mean, we saw them, in the morning. Well, at least my dad was gone before we would get on the bus to go to school. And then, he would go from the flower shop to the jazz nightclub. And so we wouldn't see him sometimes till 10 or 11 o'clock. We would always see him on Sunday.
Yeah.
But, and so I saw the toll that I took on our family. And I said, there's got to be a better way. And I thought that better way was corporate America, but that fallacy of, security, that corporate environment provides security and it's a career path. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's even more cutthroat, speaking from experience, in corporate America than versus, being an entrepreneur out here fighting, right? At least as an entrepreneur, you're able to control your own destiny to a certain extent. I kid with my kids. One of my kids is an entrepreneur. He started his own company. Used to work for us, and he started his own company. And I said, one thing you'll learn about being an entrepreneur is, your boss is an asshole, but the good news is you're your own boss. So you know that asshole intimately from that standpoint. So from my vantage point, again, couldn't have done it at 30, absolutely right. But I'm so glad that, this was God's plan for me. And we got no regrets.
That's fantastic. It's, Um, uh, I love that insight because, like, it's funny because my background is actually in engineering, corporate America too. I didn't make it quite as long as you did in corporate America. Actually, my first job was a co-op at a company here locally in Atlanta, and I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna, they had me do all this data collection, time studies and stuff. Like, okay, I don't mind doing that work. Spent 3 weeks doing manual data collection. I was like, this is great. Just give me a chance to do the analysis. Teach me something. We did all the data collection and they said, okay, great. Thank you. Took the data and I never heard back from until a couple months later. And the guy who we collected the data for got all the pats on the back. I was like, hey, great job. And it was like, wait a second. I was like, he's like, there wasn't anything there. And it's like, okay. That was to me, I was like, you know what? I'm going to control my own future.
Mhm.
And so I still worked in corporate America for a while and came through optical through my wife, who's but it's, I do think that it is, yeah, I think people, I'd rather have it in my hands versus someone else's.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, it is stressful, but again, when you got skin in the game, and you're looking in the mirror, and when you got to dig deep, knowing that you play a big part in controlling what's going to happen to you and your family, that intrinsic motivation, knowing that you have your hand on all the levers that are necessary, much more comfortable and secure to me than working in a large corporate environment where, you're subject to the variances of a board making a decision, mergers, acquisitions, the whole nine yards. Don't get along with your boss and, your career could be cut short because of a personality conflict. And again, don't get me wrong. Everybody has a path. And again, I thought my path was going to be corporate America, but it ended up being, what we're doing here as an entrepreneur. And so again, no regrets, still a lot of hard work ahead of us, but it's been one heck of a ride to this point.
Yeah, it's awesome. Uh, let's talk a little bit about, you're going to have a unique perspective on this question, staffing challenges. You're seeing across several states, a lot of locations. What are you seeing with staffing challenges? How are you kind of dealing with it? Pearl Vision tends to be open on weekends. That tends to be a little tougher now. Doctors, talk through all the staffing challenges you're experiencing.
Wow, it is, besides cash, cash is king and cash flow, that's next biggest challenge that we have is staffing, is people. And again, the world has changed in the 10 plus years that we've been owning the business. And it's gone from average wage rates, literally increasing, 20, 30% from when we started, in some cases higher, and not seeing the reimbursements coming from insurers and payers keeping up with that. So you're having to find other ways to accommodate and ensure your profitability, having to pay your people more. And people, and again, this isn't an indictment of today's workforce, but they have different priorities. My generation, it was about working hard, getting ahead, making as much money as you could, and then enjoying it when you're in your 50s in your retirement. Whereas a lot of the today's, the Gen X and some of the other folks, they approach it completely different. They want to enjoy it now. What do you mean work Saturdays? I don't want to work Saturdays from that standpoint. What do you mean I got to work till 7 o'clock? I want to enjoy that now. And I want you to pay me more while I'm enjoying it now. And again, as leaders, not only within, entrepreneurial endeavors, but corporations, everybody's having to adjust. And again, the best thing that we've done is kind of turn over a lot of what I call the soft skills to my wife, who's our head of HR. And she's, much more in tune, from an empathetic standpoint than I am. She's much more, understanding of today's environment. And, 2 years ago, we would have said, if you can't work for us 3 Saturdays a month as a doctor, we're not going to employ you. Now we've got some doctors that are only working 1 Saturday a month. So we've had to change and evolve, or we run the risk of not being able to staff our location. So that is, again, outside of cash. And as an entrepreneur, cash is king. The number one problem or opportunity is people. And that has been something that continues to be a challenge. One of my, the 11, 10 hours of our work a day, probably 50% or more is all dedicated to people. Relationship with our doctors, recruiting doctors, helping understand, career pathing for our high potential store general managers that are looking to get to next and to grow, recruiting store managers from that standpoint. And I'm involved in all of it. And so, and some days it's 100% of what I do from that standpoint. The strategy piece is the easy piece because, it's pretty easy to figure out. When you're dealing with people, you're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with a whole host of issues and challenges that just add a degree of complexity that has been very tough for us. And I think it's going to continue to be a challenge, for as long as we own the business from that standpoint.
Yeah. I like what you're saying though so tell me a little bit more about how you operationalize that. Like, what do you mean by, spending time with people, developing people? Is there maybe like one or two things you could share that folks might be able to say like, oh, I could start that. Maybe, something that's a little more, scale invariant, meaning that, hey, if you have one location or 100 locations, you can still kind of apply some of these rules.
Well, I think number one, you have to invest in people. And when I invest in people, I mean, you've got to be willing to pay at or above market rate. Our strategy went from, let's see if we can get the least expensive optometric technician we can at 12 to 14 bucks an hour, trade them up versus going out and paying above market and getting someone with an experience base and then retaining them over time. So we learned our lesson the hard way. Don't cut corners when it comes to paying for top talent. Top talent demands top wages. And if you're kidding yourself and you think you can keep top talent by paying mediocre wages and salaries. So that was a lesson that we learned. You can never overspend when it comes to top talent. You may think you're overspending, but the opportunity cost of having a doctor vacant, an office vacant, not seeing patients, is 10 times the cost of paying that incremental 5% that you would need to pay to retain that top talent. So that's number one. Bite the bullet and pay for top talent. You will never regret that decision, especially if you engender loyalty and trust for that employee. So when that recruiter calls, they're more apt to remember that you took a chance, probably paid them more than they were deserving of at one point. And now they're loyal and they're with you forever because you're doing those type of things that engender respect. So that's probably number one operational lesson that we learned. early on, let's get them as cheap as we can, versus, man, you got to pay for top talent,
Yeah.
because top talent understands their worth, especially in today's marketplace. And people are recruiting aggressively. I mean, all my stores, will have competitors disguise themselves as patrons and ask for the store manager. Then when the store manager gets on the phone, they quickly, oh, this is, you know, Mary Smith
Or,
from,
yeah.
XYZ Optical. I'm looking for a store manager and I'm paying you $90,000, something like that. I mean, this is what's happening. And so again, try to do your best to engender loyalty and trust with your people, by making that investment. That's the number one thing that I would share with anybody, whether it's one location, whether it's 100 from that standpoint. You have to have the ability to pay for top talent. It's painful. And even sometimes you're willing to pay is someone is always going to be willing to outbid you. So what do you have in place other than the compensation that resonates with those employees that they value? Though, so they may decide to stay and forego that opportunity that may pay them 10% more, because there are other things that you're doing as a company that appeal to other factors that weigh into their decision process where they're going to work. We have things such as our President's Club each year, where a lot of companies have gone away from President's Club. We've been doing it now for 10 years. We take our top 25 employees at the end of the year through a year-long contest where they earn points. And last year we went to Punta Cana, year before we went to Cabo, and we just celebrate. And that is a trip that, every employee wants to, to participate in, because we flood our internal website with pictures from that trip. And again, it's a celebration of our best and brightest. So again, it's not necessarily the paycheck, although that's a big part. There are other elements and factors that weigh into keeping your top talent from that standpoint. So for me, top talent has to be paid by top talent. And then the last thing I'll share with you is top talent wants to work for top talent.
Mm.
Don't think you're going to be able to recruit an A player if you've got a C plus leader or manager. That's oil and water from that standpoint. And so in your key leadership position of the organization, ensure you've got top talent. You've got leaders in mid-level positions within your organizations, or if it's just one location, whoever's running that practice, if you aren't running that practice, is someone that your employees trust, they respect, and they look up to. Because if they're a C player, they're going to get very frustrated and they're going to leave. And no amount of money is going to allow you to keep them, because they value and they make decisions based upon the decisions that you make. The fact that you're keeping that poor performer in a leadership position, in a position of authority, sends a loud message to them that you are not a great talent evaluator. And what's going to happen when they want to get promoted? You've allowed this malcontent, this poor performer, this average performer to stay in that role, and they're going to get frustrated and leave. So that's the operational tidbits that I would have. Pay for top talent and make sure you got top talent in key leadership positions, because people work for people. And an A player is never going to be happy working for a C player.
Yeah. That's a great insight. You're so right. It's people leave bosses, right? So yeah. Um, so what are you most excited about in the future of the industry, your company? Like, what excites you the most?
Huh. Yeah, I think it's the unknown. We used to call it a fear of the unknown, but we've tried to reposition that to an excitement about the unknown, because there are elements that we always talk about internally. That's the controllables. My 15-year-old son, our youngest, we were at a quarterback camp 2 weeks ago out in Arizona, and they had a guest speaker that came in. And he was talking about the quarterback position and said, "Yeah, hey, control the things that controllables. Don't worry about stuff you can't control." And I just sat there in the back of the room. I was taking notes just like all the kids were, because that's so true. There are things in business that you can control that position you to handle whatever the business life throws at you. If you're on top of your controllables, if your fundamentals are sound. Now, unless there's another global, pandemic, and hopefully, forbid, that's not coming down the pipeline. but you never know. But that unknown is turned from a fear to an excitement because we're positioned as a business. The fundamentals are rock solid. So we'll be able to handle whatever comes our way. If you're holding the thing together with chicken wire or duct tape, the first, 2x4 that hits you in the face, things are going to crumble. So we try to get excited about the unknown because we can't control the future. As best as we may, we can't control what, President Trump is going to do with regard to tariffs. That's out of our control, right? And so we can sit here and fret about it, or we can say, what can we control? If this happens, what can we control? So it moves from fear, which is paralyzing, to excitement, which builds adrenaline, which builds that anticipation for, man, I want to see what we can handle, so bring it on. And I think that's the attitude that as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, don't fear the unknown, embrace it.
Yeah, I love the focus on what you can control and saying like, well, that's exciting because you have opportunities to do so much because
Oh yeah.
in fact, if I'm putting words in your mouth here, but it's almost like, well, I want stuff to be different, right? Like it gives me an opportunity to be competitive and change things and try things new. Yeah.
Yeah. When it's a level playing field, it's very difficult to compete on a level playing field, believe it or not, because there are always competitors in our space, deep pocketed, multinational, multi-billion dollar corporation that can throw money at a problem in a level playing field. When the playing field is a little unlevel, right? When the opportunities require a different necessary approach, that's where I think small, nimble organizations have an advantage because we can react on a dime, right? Large corporations, it takes a long time to turn that ship, whereas we're agile. I can make a decision tomorrow and we've got price changes across all 91 of our stores. Large multinational organizations, it takes them time to go through that decision-making process. I've got a board of managers that I can call literally at any time, day or night, and we make decisions literally in the moment. Whereas I think that's a huge advantage when you're competing, against larger, deep pocketed organizations from that standpoint. And as an entrepreneur in the optical space, the playing field is littered with multi-billion dollar organizations that are competing for that same patient, that same customer as we are, alongside, the independents. And so that's where, in my opinion, it gets us to the position where we're going to compete and win because we know what we have at our disposal. We know, our positive attributes and we know our warts better than our competition does. So for us, again, I think it comes down to control what you can control, embrace, be excited about the unknown, and look for irregularities in the marketplace where you can compete and win because other large players may be avoiding those, irregularities.
Yeah. I like that. When everyone zigs, you zag, right? That's the entrepreneur.
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's funny being in lots of entrepreneur peer groups, things like that. That's the one common thing I do notice is that sometimes common advice is actually the wrong advice. Sometimes it's the right advice, sometimes it's not. You just got to understand when the difference. And
Right, right,
um,
right.
yeah, I think it was funny because like my background is in manufacturing, and lean manufacturing efficiencies, operational efficiencies, and the rule of thumb with offices when we started our offices was volume. Get them in, get them out, right? Which is lends really itself to lean operational efficiencies. But my wife didn't want to practice that way, so I was like, okay, well, let's flip this on its head. What kind of patient do we need to attract that values that extra time and that extra
Mhm.
touch? And so instead of trying to do the traditional way, we said let's try a different way. It's worked out so far. So yeah, I like
No, no, very, very true. And, and I think that's as you think about, optometry, the landscape moving forward, there is that dichotomy between the volume associated with certain insurance panels that the reimbursements levels are set, that it's a volume game as you're going to play and compete versus those patients that are looking for, the more, dry eye treatments, the IPL therapy, all these other things that require more time. They may take 2 exam slots. And so that dichotomy exists. So what's your right lane as a company, as a location, to ensure that you're optimizing, profitability from that standpoint. So again, it's going to change. It vacillates back and forth. What works today may not work tomorrow necessarily. I think that's the dexterity that we're constantly trying to ensure that we be cognizant of, because once you get set in your ways, you start to miss things, and once you start missing things, you look around before you know it, and you've dug yourself a hole that it takes twice the effort to get out of
Yeah.
had you not been, mindful of everything that's happening around you and keep looking for what's next. Because once you get set in your ways, you get something that's working. The only thing that's guaranteed is that it's not going to stay working for very long. This world changes too fast and too quickly to get set and, kind of rudimentary, because those fundamentals always, if the fundamentals are solid, you have the ability to zig and zag and make changes and things that keep driving your business forward.
Nice. I want to shift gears a little bit. You have a very interesting personal story. So I'd like for you just to share with us one story that really comes to mind first when I say an experience that was very formative for you that made you who you are today.
You know, um, this is gonna probably. I think it'll make sense to your listening audience from that standpoint. But I grew up in South Georgia. Parents were both entrepreneurs, and um, Albany, Georgia is about 3 hours south of Atlanta. And as a high school junior, senior, I pretty much had my career path lined up. Right, I was going to go to the University of Georgia, and work at, whatever that was going to be. My parents both entrepreneurs. I figured, I come back, take over my dad's flower shop or something along those lines from that standpoint. Didn't want to get in the jazz nightclub business, but the flower shop, he made a good living. That's what my career path was, as a high school junior. I took the PSAT test. And I think they're still taking that in high school now. And I started getting, because of my scores, I started getting all these letters from these colleges from that standpoint. And I got a letter from the West Point, United States Military Academy, from that staff. And I didn't know what West Point, that's how ignorant I was. I didn't know what West Point was. I read the letter and I saw, there's a United States Military Academy. Thought it was pretty cool. My dad, having, been a Korean War veteran, was blown away. He thought that was the coolest thing since sliced bread. I could care less about it. Was definitely not going in the Army. Little girlfriend in high school was going to University of Georgia. So I was going to go to University of Georgia. So I didn't even, they have a little perforated edge. You
Yeah.
fill out the bottom and send it in if you're interested in attending. I didn't fill it out, but my dad did. So my dad filled it out and sent it in. And unbeknownst to me, when they were sending the correspondence back, my father was filling things out because he knew, in his wisdom, that I was ignorant and didn't know what this opportunity that was in front of me was. So fast forward to graduating senior trip. My dad had a childhood friend he grew up with that was stationed in Hawaii. So our big graduation present to me, my family went to Hawaii, to Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, and we stayed on post with Colonel Adolph Height, who was my dad's childhood friend. And we were having dinner one night. We stayed at their house, and my dad asked Adolph to tell me about the military. So he did. And I remember, listening to the stories he was telling me. This is the first time I really learned about the military. And I just was kicking myself saying, man, I should have taken, that West Point offer more seriously. And Colonel Height said, what West Point? I said, well, told my whole story. My dad admitted at that point that he had been filling it out. And he had a letter from a captain that was in the recruiting command that worked at West Point. And so Colonel Height called him literally from Hawaii.
Wow.
And this was middle of June. Reception day at West Point was July 1st. I hadn't filled out any of the required paperwork and process to get admitted to the academy. But Colonel Height called that captain, I forget the captain's name, and said, hey, I'm sitting here with Billy. That was I was Billy Noble, now William or Bill. but my dad was Bill, so I was little Billy. I'm sitting here with Billy Noble, and he's interested in attending the academy. Is there anything that we can do at this point? And I fully expect him to say no. But he said, well, if he's open to going to the prep school, and West Point has a prep school, which is at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, we may be able to get him into the prep school. Let me make some calls. I'll call you back. Next morning, we get a call. Hey, we can get William Noble into the prep school, but he's got to leave today to fly to New Jersey and start at West Point Prep School. We had packed. All I know is that I looked at Colonel Height and I said, yes. And so we went to the PX. We bought some clothes for me. My mom, packed everything, and I got on the plane the next morning and flew to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. And getting into West Point, or the prep school at that time, which led to me getting into West Point, which led to all the relationships that I made with friends that invested in my business, back 10 years ago, all because of that decision. Colonel Height making a phone call at, 8:00 Hawaii time. I don't know what time it was, at West Point, New York, when that captain answered the phone. The fact that he answered the phone, that was God's will. I can't take credit for that, right? Because, literally, there are so many kids that want to get into West Point. They do everything the right way and aren't afforded the opportunity, or they don't get in. I did it because of my dad being, following up and being wiser than I was. Colonel Height making that call when he didn't have to do that. That captain answering the phone that got me into West Point Prep School. And the rest, as they say, is history. So that, to me, that's a long-winded story, but I tell you, sometimes, again, we think we're masters of our own destiny. Sometimes it takes, the kindness of others and others believing in you when you may not necessarily believe in yourself, that allows you to, to make a life-changing decision, because the door was opened by someone that gave a damn. And so for me, that's the single defining thing when I look at it. That was the tipping point where all of this kind of fell into place. And so that's what I would, I don't know if that's, too long, but it's, when you answered that question, that's immediately what came to mind.
Yeah, that's actually a great story. I think it kind of exemplifies your, kind of mirrors your career a little bit too, in terms of the optical side. Like, here's an opportunity you struck when you needed to, and you took advantage of, or you made the most out of it with the relationships.
Yep.
So I like that. That's a really cool story.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, hey, can you
Yep.
make it? Yeah, you're West Point if you leave for Hawaii today.
Yeah.
And get there.
So, and again, I had, I had the chance to think about it. I probably would have said, yes, but I was, again, thanks to my father, having the foresight and all those people that I mentioned, it turned out as probably as well as I could have imagined. It's been a hell of a ride to this point. And what keeps me, excited is I think the best is yet to come. As scary as that sounds, I think the best is absolutely yet to come, for our business. And we're excited about what the future holds.
Yeah, that's exciting. Let's time travel a little bit. You know what? You have HBS and you have West Point. So I'll let you decide which one you want to pick with this one. 4 days after graduating, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself? And tell me which school and why, or you can do both if you'd like.
Um, I think it would be HBS, because at West Point, it was predetermined what I was going to do. I was a Black Hawk pilot. I was going to fly helicopters in the Army. So that was predetermined. HBS, I went to work for McKinsey, from that standpoint. And in hindsight, I think the advice I would have given myself is be open, be more curious, from that standpoint. I think I was a little full of myself, full of bravado, and I was a little cocky, and arrogant, newly minted Harvard MBA, and I wasn't curious enough. I didn't have the humility that I should have early on in my career, because I think I made some snap decisions in judgments and was perhaps brusque in my mannerisms that may have turned off some people that could have been wonderful mentors to me had I not had that era of invincibility that surrounded me at that time. I think that advice would be curious and be humble because I think people are more empathetic and embracing of curiosity and sincerity versus cockiness and arrogance. And yeah, I would tell you at the time it was confidence that came across as cockiness. But let's call us a spade a spade. It was probably more cockiness, and I think that that closed the door to some opportunities that could have been phenomenal for me. I don't know if I would end up in any different place than I am now, but I think humility and curiosity are traits and attributes that I wish I had more of when I was, coming out of HBS from that standpoint, because who knows where life's journey could have taken me. But that would be my advice and counsel to me coming out of HBS, 4 days after graduation.
I like that. It's interesting because curiosity is one of those things. Every company I'm a part of, it's in one of the values that I always make sure to say curiosity. So it's
Mhm.
I think as an at least in my entrepreneur life, it served me really well being
Mhm.
curious. So I think that's a
Yep.
great lesson that resonates with me as well. Appreciate you sharing.
No, my pleasure. And I have to remind myself even now, at 61 years old, stay curious. And it's a hard lesson because sometimes, I think I'm right. I'm so convicted, and I just rush right past curious to a decision answer because I'm a ready, fire, aim kind of guy, and that's has served me well. But I think it's also bit me in the ass more times than not because sometimes it's okay to ready, aim, fire, and so that's a lesson that I continue to tell myself time and time again.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this will resonate with that. So I know I do. I use the analogy of I'll build a parachute on the way down.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely. There's a place for that. Don't get me wrong.
yeah,
But I think you need a healthy balance, because, it's a long race, from that standpoint.
very true. Well, Bill, where can people connect with you or find you if they want to connect with you?
Well, I'm an open book. I'm on LinkedIn, from that standpoint, and I think my profile is such that you can drop me a note, from that standpoint. We got westpointoptical.com, which is our website. You can send a message, through that medium as well. But, from my vantage point, I'm not hard to find. I love talking to young entrepreneurs. As I mentioned, my son has started his own company. He just got through his seed financing, and so he's well on his way. And I think he's a UPenn graduate, and he started working for us in the company. And so I'm that was probably the highlight of my career. Here was having my son join us coming out of Wharton, working for a year and a half, and then finding his calling, and he's off and running, and he's
Is
one
he,
of those guys that going to be doing great things in the future. And he's in our space. He's in
let's
the
say, is he
opposite.
in our space? What is his business? Let's give his
Yeah,
business a plug too.
he started a company called Aurelio,
Really?
which is an e-commerce platform for contact lens. It competes directly with Marlowe.
Okay.
And trust me, the hundreds of offices that are using his platform now, if you're an independent optometrist, if you're working in a small chain, check out Aurelio, the website. You can do a quick demo, guys. It is the best thing since sliced bread. I'm biased, obviously, but the fact that he's got hundreds of offices now that are providing, testaments to how easy it is to use, and he saw it firsthand. Working in stores in high school, in our stores, as a high school student, working when he got out of Wharton, coming here and seeing it in our stores and seeing firsthand the pain and frustration experienced by opticians when they were trying to order contact lenses from that standpoint. And he, to his credit, went to India, found developers, and came up with this whole platform and skin and programming, all of that with skills that he, this kid played, was high school football stud, played football at Wharton, and how he learned how to code, I'll never know. But again, he knew where to find the resources, and he's created a platform, Aurelio, guys, that if you do nothing from this conversation, do yourself a favor, go to Aurelio's website and demo it, and have your wife take a look at it, or have your office manager practices take a look at it. And I'll be shocked if they don't tell you that we want to, take a longer, closer look at the Aurelio platform. It's that damn good.
We'll put it in the show notes.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
We're always looking to help other, folks out, and that sounds like a great product. That I know there's a couple of competing. We had another lady on, Rihanna Rue, who also has a similar, not exactly the same product, but similar pain points. But I do.
Yep.
We'll definitely check it out for our offices. I appreciate the insight there.
Yeah, it's a platform that will, have offshoots as he continues down his, his roadmap, technology roadmap, and other pain points within, optometry to all be from that same base platform. So he started with what was easier from that standpoint, and now in the biggest pain point, and then he's got additional technology advancements that will come down the path. But it's certainly worth taking a look at again. So I appreciate you putting it in the show notes from that standpoint. But again, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, our website, and I'm happy to engage with anyone in our space or an entrepreneur in general that has some questions. I think we have a duty and responsibility to give back. I probably don't give back enough, but with the 15-year-old son, in this business, my time is I'm stretched, as they say. But we got our first grandson,
Oh, wow.
Archie, who was born. So I'm trying to find a way to slow down and give back and do more from that standpoint. So that's how you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Bill, for being a guest on the show.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. I hope things went well, and let me know if if we need to do some edits from that standpoint. But I enjoyed it tremendously. I love telling the story, and I always learn something when I do these things. So I appreciate your thinking of me and reaching out, and I hope it's something that goes over well with your audience.
I love the conversation. I think it will. So, and thank you again, audience, for listening. If you learned anything, laughed, please share the podcast or the YouTube video with your friends and subscribe. And thank you again, Bill. And this has been another exciting episode of Optometrists Building Empires. We'll see you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Optometrists Building Empires. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, visit buildingempires.live. This show is proudly sponsored by My Business Care Team. My Business Care Team was born out of staffing challenges my wife and I faced together, managing multiple optometry locations. We refined our approach at Classic Vision Care and now offer our expertise to others. If you're experiencing challenges with staffing and you'd like to set up a discovery call, we'd be happy to help you and connect you with the right resources. We'll see you next time.